Hello learners, welcome to our session today. I'm your instructor, CPA Aringo Frederick. So in our class today, I'll want us to handle a very important concept in our syllabus, both for the students who are doing management accounting in section 2 and for those who are doing management accounting in section 5, and also for those who are doing ATD. This concept is very important. It's going to assist us to open our mind wide when we are looking at applications of marginal costing or some of the short-term decisions that we normally tend to make. So in our last class, I believe among the applications of marginal costing and also looking at our short-term planning and decision making, we focused mainly on the concept of CVP analysis. So in our class today is a continuation of the applications, but today I want us to look at the concept known as limiting factor. Concept known as limiting factor. A very important concept that we must always have at the back of our mind. A very important concept that we must always have at the back of our mind for us to handle short-term planning, decision making, and also looking at applications of marginal costing. So to do this, first of all, it's upon us to understand the whole concept behind limiting factor. And in understanding these concepts, my good student, we normally tend to look at a case whereby I'm having resources within our organization and we want to produce to our maximum. But at times, you'll find that there are some resources that might tend to hinder us to produce to our maximum. So these resources that will hinder us, these resources are going to limit us to produce to our maximum, are what you are terming them as limiting factor. Take for example this case, my good students, take for example this case. Maybe there is this organization whereby you want to say to produce 20,000 units. We want to produce 20,000 units. And in producing these 20,000 units, maybe I require, say, like 20,000 hours. To produce the 20,000 units, maybe you require 20,000 hours. But you'll find the available, because this is the required, but you'll find that the available resources in the organization maybe is only 15,000 hours. So this is available. This is available. We want to produce to our maximum of 20,000 units, and we only have 15,000 units. So you'll find that the number of hours here will limit us to produce to our maximum of 20,000 units. So in this event, you'll find that these hours will be our limiting factor. It is this resource that you're terming it as hours that will limit us to produce to our maximum. And that is what we are terming it as what? As limiting factor. The whole idea behind limiting factor is what we've talked about there. And that is our limiting factor concept. So also, you will be able to understand that we have required and we have available. So the difference between the required resources and available resources, we normally term it as what? As shortfall. The difference between the required resources and available resources, we normally term it as what? As shortfall. So in our case, my shortfall will be 5,000 hours. That will be our shortfall. So my good students will find that ideally this is a concept that we must always have at the back of our mind anytime we are dealing with what? With limiting factor. I've tried to explain the concept there, and that is how we have it. Then a good question will be, you will find that maybe I'm having the 15,000 units which are available, and required we had 20,000. Does it mean that we will not produce? We will still produce, but we are going to produce the number of units that we can with the available resources. So this production that we are going to consider with the available resources, as much as is limited, is what we normally term and look at it as what? As our optimum production. Is what you normally say, this is our optimum production, meaning that with the available resources, this is the optimum that we can produce that is going to give us the profit that we do require with the available resources. So there's that also concept of what? Of optimum production. So that is the whole concept, my good students, behind limiting factor, So the moment you've grasped that concept, we can now introduce limiting factor. To understand the whole concept, you can now introduce limiting factor. And you can say that this is a scarce, limiting factor is a scarce resource. Limiting factor is a scarce resource within the organization that will hinder maximum production. We are saying limiting factor is a scarce resource or resources within an organization that will limit/hinder maximum production. That is what you're terming it as a limiting factor. Now we've realized that I need to produce our optimum production with the limited resources. So that case should take us to the concept of determination of optimum production, or we are talking of optimum production. With the available resources, what would be our optimum production? With the available resources that we do have, what would be our optimum production? So we are looking at optimum production. So coming up with the optimum production, I want us to follow these steps. They will really assist us in understanding this concept very well. So to consider or to prepare our optimum production, we normally tend to follow these steps. So that is step number one. Talk of step number one. What we need to do is to do what? To determine or identify limiting factor. Determine/identify limiting factor. Determine/identify the limiting factor. And of course, we've explained what limiting factor is. Step number two, my good students, what you need to do, what you need to consider is determine the contribution margin for each product. If you're given a number of products, determine the contribution margin. For each product. Determine the contribution margin for each product. Then step number three, what you need to do is to determine the contribution margin per limiting factor. Step number three, determine the contribution margin. Determine the contribution margin per limiting factor. Determine the contribution margin per limiting factor. Determine the contribution margin per limiting factor. That should be your step number three. Then talk of step number four. Step number four, what you need to do, my good student, is to rank the products according to the contribution margin. Rank the products according to the contribution margin per limiting factor. Rank the products according to the contribution margin per limiting factor. Starting with the highest. Contribution margin per limiting factor. Then step number 5, which is also our last step. So step number 5, produce according to the rank. Produce according to the ranks in step 4 above. In step 4 above. In step 4 above. So these are the 5 main steps that you must always consider and have in mind anytime I want to pass or to solve any problem for limiting factor. When you are asked to determine the optimum production, I must always consider these steps. They are very important and they will really assist us anytime we are dealing with the concept of limiting factor. Anytime you are dealing with the concept of limiting factor. So for us to understand this concept clearly, my good students, I'll want us to go to our past paper questions and see how we can handle this concept of limiting factor. So to do that, let me share the question as we always do. I'm going to share this question on our screen. If possible, kindly take a screenshot of that question. Then we work it out together. This question was tested in November 2020, section 2. This question was tested in November 2020, question number November 2020, question number 3. A very good question that will assist us to understand the concept of limiting factor. So let me share the question with you here so that you can take a screenshot and we work it out together. So this is our question here. November 2020, question number 3. November 2020, question number 3. So this is what you are told. Part A, describe 4 limitations of management accounting in an organization. The beauty part of it is that we have all that. Then come to part B of the question. This is what you are told, that a manufacturing firm produces 3 products, namely X, Y, and Z. The following information relates to the production of the 3 products. So I'm given product X, Y, and Z. Unit selling prices I'm given. Variable production cost per unit I'm also given. Come to our additional information. This is what we are told, that the total fixed production cost for the 3 products amounted to 400,000. The total fixed production cost for the 3 products amounted to 400,000. Note number 2, labor hours are currently limited to 25,000 hours paid at an hourly rate of 8 shillings during the production period. So at this point, my good student, is that as the examiner has given us a limiting factor. He has told us that we had a limiting factor on labor hours, which was limited to only 25,000 hours. And each hour, I was paying 8 shillings during the production period. Note number 3, the maximum demand for product X, Y, and Z are 2,000, 1,800, and 3,000 units, respectively. Required, we are required to prepare the current shortfall in labor hours at maximum demand. And part 2, the optimal product mix and the resultant profit. The optimal product mix and the resultant profit. When I've seen this question, my good student, kindly just take a screenshot. Whenever I've seen this question, what we need to do first of all is to do what? Is to smile. Why should we smile? Because everything that we need to handle in that question already, we have stated it here when we introduced this concept of limiting factor. We had stated everything here. So the only thing that I need to do, the best thing that I need to do is to smile, because we have everything, because you have everything. I'm giving you a chance to take a screenshot of that question so that we continue so that you continue, so that you continue, so that you continue. Okay, so I believe we've taken a screenshot of that question, so we can now continue. So the examiner first of all wants us to determine what? Want us to determine shortfall. The examiner wants us to determine number A of the question 1, we are required to determine our shortfall. And you know very well, when I'm required to determine our shortfall, this is what you are going to consider. We are going to consider our required resources minus available resources. That should give us our shortfall. Required resources minus available resources. So come and determine our required resources. How will you determine our required resources? Because the examiner had clearly stated to us that we had a limiting factor in labor hours. So it will be upon us to determine for each product how many hours did we require to produce our maximum production. For each product, how many hours did you require for us to produce to our maximum production? So identify the products that you are given, and the products that you are given according to our question, we are given product X, Y, and Z. You are given product X, Y, and Z. These are the products given, my good students. These are the products given. Now, I want us to determine, for us to produce 1 unit of product X, how many hours did we require? For us to produce 1 unit of product X, how many units did we require? How many hours did we require? This is a question. My good students. Here is what you are told. We were told that, look at note number 2. Labor hours are currently limited to 25,000 hours, paid at an hourly rate of 8 shillings during the production period. And labor hours that I was paying, product X I was paying 24, product Y I was paying 44, and Z 32. So I'm having 24, 44, and 32. And each hour I was paying 8 shillings. So I'm giving product X. The total cost that I incurred to produce 1 unit of product X in regard to labor was 24 shillings. And each labor hour I was paying 8 shillings. Each hour I was paying 8 shillings. So the question is, can we now determine the hours required for us to produce 1 unit? Yes, we can. Because if I'm given, like say for product X, the total cost I'm going to incur is 24 shillings. That is to produce 1 unit. And each hour I'm paying 8 shillings. Definitely I can determine that each unit I was using how many hours. So therefore I'm going to divide by 8. We divide by 8 and we divide by 8 to give us each unit we required how many hours. Say for like product X, this is what we have. I'm having 24 divided by 8 to give us 3. 44 divided by 8 to give us a 5.5. 32 divided by 8 to give us 4. So I can confidently come and say that for us to produce 1 unit of X, I required 3 hours. For us to produce 1 unit of Y, we required 5.5 hours. And for us to produce 1 unit of Z, we required 4 hours. Then the other question will be, how many units are we producing to our maximum? So we multiply by the number of units. And in that case, you are given in which note? come and look here. We are given in which note? We are given in note number, look at note number 3. Look at note number 3, my good students, and additional information. We are told that the maximum demand for product X, Y, and Z is 2,000, 1,800, and what? 1,800 and 3,000 units. 1,800 and 3,000 units. 1,800 and 3,000 units. So this should give us the number of hours required to produce each unit, and finally to give us the total required resources. So therefore I'm having 2,000 by 3, of course that should give me 6,000 hours. 5.5 by 1,800, that should give me 9,900 hours. 4 by 3,000, that should give us, of course, 12,000 hours. So the total resources, the total hours required, 9,900, we add 6,000. So you should be talking of, I'm having 6,000, correct, plus 9,900 plus 12,000. I'm having, that should be, just a moment, 9,900 plus 6,000. Okay, I'm having 27,900 hours. 27,900. These are required. These are required hours. What about available, my good students? What about available hours? What about available hours? Available hours, you are given how many hours? Look at that case. In our question, you are given the company only had how many hours? Note number 2. Labor hours are currently limited to 25,000 hours. So I'm having only 25,000 hours. So therefore, my shortfall in this case will be very simple, because my shortfall here, we should be talking of how many hours being our shortfall. We should be talking of 2,900 hours being our shortfall. 2,900 hours. And that is what you are required to do in part 1 of that question. What about part 2? We need to determine our optimum production. And to determine our optimum production, we have our steps here, which we had already looked at that. So therefore, it's upon us to prepare our contribution, statement. Where in that case already we have our limiting factor. So it's upon us to come up with what? Contribution margin. Step number 2, determine the contribution margin for each product. And you know very well, for us to determine our contribution margin, we normally talk of selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. So therefore, I'm having product X, product Y. I'm having talk of this case. We have product X, product Y, and we have product Z. So determine our selling price. What will be our selling price given according to our question? What was the selling price given, my good students? I know you have the question already, where in this case we had 250, 460, and 320, right? What about our variable costs? Our variable cost, we can take summation of the 3. Like clearly you can see we had, under variable cost, we had raw materials, we had labor, and we had what? Overheads. We had 3 components of variable cost: raw materials, labor, and overheads. I just want us to get the summation of the 3. So like for product X, I should be talking of, let me have it here, so that we work it out together. Look at product X. I'm having under variable production cost per unit. You can clearly see I'm having raw materials, labor, and what? Overheads. So what I want you to do is to sum up the total variable cost for each product. Let us work it out together. X, 70 plus 24 plus 56. That should give me 150. Y, 155 plus 44 plus 98. That should give me 297. Z, 110 plus 32 plus 75. That should give me 217. That should give us 217. Believing that we are all together up to that point. Believing that we are all together up to that point. So this is what we'll be having. These are our variable costs that we have determined. Now, having our selling price and we do have our variable cost, confidently I can come and determine our contribution margin. So our contribution margin for the first case, I should be having 100. For 60 minus 297, that should give us 163. 320 minus 217, that should give us 103, being our contribution margin. What about our limiting factor, my good students? Step number 3, determine the contribution margin per limiting factor. And our limiting factor, you can clearly see we had determined them at this point, where limiting factor for product X we had 3, product Y we had 5.5, and product Z we had 4. So that should give us contribution margin per limiting factor of how much? For X, we should be talking of how much? I should be talking of 100 divided by 3. 100 divided by 3. So that should give us 33.3. 163 divided by 5.5. That should give us 29.6. 29.64. And 103 divided by 4. That should give us 25.75. 25.75. Then after that case, what do? We rank the products according to the contribution margin per limiting factor, starting with the highest contribution margin per limiting factor. So come and rank. We want to rank. I want you guys to rank for me. I want us to rank starting with the highest contribution margin per limiting factor. So the highest here I can see is product X1, product Y2, and product Z3. So we have ranked according to contribution margin per limiting factor, per limiting factor, per limiting factor. The next concept is to do what? See how it's flowing. Just see how it's flowing. Just see how it's flowing. And by the way, if you are seeing us via YouTube, remember we have all the video, full course videos in our phone application. If you go to your phone application, that is M-Darasa. Just go to Play Store, search M-Darasa. It has an extension of the best e-learning platform in East Africa. Download the phone application, create your account. After you've created an account, our dashboard is very user-friendly. Just go to, if you're doing KASNEB, just go to KASNEB course. Select if you're doing CPA or any other course that you're doing. If it is CPA, go to CPA. And if you want management accounting, just go and select management accounting. You'll find that you're going to get all the video tutorials of management accounting from topic 1 to the last topic, from topic 1 to the last topic, from topic 1 to the last topic. So, continue with our question. Now we want to produce according to the rank in step 4 above. And this is what you're timing it as what? Our optimum production. So that should take us to our optimum production. Talk of our optimum production. Talk of our optimum production. Talk of our optimum production. Now I want us to look at our optimum production. Talk of our optimum production. How are we going to handle that? So looking at our optimum production, this is what you are going to do. This is what you are going to do. I'm going to have our rank. So I'm going to have, if you can allow me to, or rather I'll just use that space. Hopefully it will fit. So I'm having our rank. We have our products. We have available resources. In that case, I'm going to squeeze it sana. So what you do, let's just use this space. Let's just use this space, because I want you guys to grasp it very, very correctly. Now, to produce to our optimum production, looking at 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 our optimum production, this is what we should have, this is what we should have, this is what we should have. So, I'm having the same case where we are going to consider our rank, products, available resources. AR stands for available resources, required resources. RR stands for required resources, and talk of our units produced. Units produced. Units produced. So that is what we have. 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 So we have it there. We have it there. So this is what we have. So looking at our question clearly, and I want us to consider the steps that we followed, all of it. Take your time, look at that question clearly before we finalize. I need to come up with our optimum production. I gave you the steps on what you are going to do. So I know continuing with that, it will be very, very simple for us. Continuing with that will be very, very simple for us. So having that case, so let us now produce to our maximum. Let us now produce to our maximum because we have everything. Let us now produce to our maximum. So therefore, rank, already we've ranked the products. Number one, we saw it was X. 1, 2, 3. I'm having X followed by Y and Z. Available resources. You can clearly see that the company had 25,000 hours, right? The company had 25,000 hours. For us to produce maximum of X, we required how many hours? 6,000 hours. And units produced maximum of X, we had how many hours? Or rather, how many units? 2,000. So, I'm having enough resources to enable us to produce to our maximum. Come to the second part. Already have consumed 6,000 hours. So how many hours have we remained with? We've remained with 19,000 hours, right? We've remained with 19,000 hours. How many hours do we require for us to produce Y? We require 9,900 hours. The question is, do we have enough to produce the maximum? I'm having available 19,000. We only require 9,900, meaning that we have enough. So 9,900. Maximum of Y to produce, we had 1,800 units. Come to available resources. Right now, I've remained with how many hours? I've consumed 9,900 hours. So I've remained with 9,100. Maximum of Z. For us to produce maximum of Z, we required how many hours? We required 12,000 hours. But we don't have the 12,000 hours. I'm only having 9,100 hours. So the question is, with these resources, how many units are we going to produce? That will be simple because this is what we are going to do. We are going to say, for us to produce our maximum of 3,000 hours, we required 12,000. For us to produce 3,000 units, we required 12,000 hours. Currently, I'm only having 9,100 hours. So the 9,100 hours, how many units are we going to produce? That's the question. So we are going to take 9,100 by 3,000. We divide by 12,000. So in that case, I can clearly see I'm having 2,275 units. And in this case, it required 9,100 units. So this is our optimum production. That is our optimum production. This is our optimum production. My good students, this is our optimum production. This is our optimum production. And that is what the examiner requires you to do in regard to our optimum production. As you have clearly seen, we've just followed all the procedures that we had mentioned earlier on. But we are not done with the question. Why? Because this is the last thing that the examiner wanted us to do. The examiner wanted us to the optimum product mix and the resultant profit. The optimal product mix and the resultant profit Already we have our optimum production mix. So we need to determine, with this case, what will be our optimum profit. And that is very simple. Why? The beauty part of it, the beauty part of this question is we already have our contribution margin. We know how to determine our profit. And of course, in that case, you're given our fixed cost. So this is how we are going to work it out. We know very well for us to determine our profit, we normally talk of CMQ minus what? Minus fixed cost. Is that correct? We had talked of that, correct? Then, in this case, we have how many products? X, Y, and Z. How many contribution margin? We had already determined our contribution margin here. Right? We had already determined our contribution margin. So I'm having 100, we have 163, and we do have 103. We multiply this one by what? We multiply this one by the number of units, which you have them here, our optimum production. 2,000, 1,800, 2275. This should give us our contribution, CMQ. That should give us our contribution, CMQ. So in that case, what will we have? What will we be having? What I'm going to have is 100 by 2,000. That should give us 200,000. Right? 163 by 1,800. That should give us how much? 293,400. And 103 by 2275. That should give us how much? 234,325. So what will be our total contribution? Plus 293,400 plus 293,400 plus 200,000 to give me a figure of 727,725 to give us 727,725 being our total contribution. Then we less what? Less fixed cost. And the question is, do we have our fixed cost? Yes, we are given our fixed cost. You can clearly see here that I was given a fixed cost of how much? I was given a fixed cost of 400,000. Note number one, the total fixed production cost for the three products amounted to 400,000. So we can clearly see we have a fixed cost of 400,000. And in this case, it has conformed with CMQ minus fixed cost. So therefore, my resultant profit with the optimum production, we should be talking of minus 400,000 to give us 327,725. And that is what the examiner wanted us to determine in that question. Just see the way it is, as simple as that. So long as you've mastered the steps correct, you'll find that it will be very, very easy for us. It will be very, very easy for us. So to this point, my good students, I want you to join me in the next session whereby we are going to handle another question for limiting factor to broaden our mind wide, So thank you so much, and let us meet in the next session. Thank you.